It's like reading English, sort of, right? But when you read Bash, you just see like some letters and some dashes and some.
It
brackets.
reminds me a lot of taking math courses.
Yeah, it's
where
very
they're
abstract.
they're like, you know what? F you, Greek. We're just doing Greek. We could write the word some, but we're not gonna. We're gonna use a giant epsilon. What? Like just use words. But no, that's not how math works, and that's not how Bash works either.
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 436 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the merger of worlds.
I'm Adam, and I'm the murder of worlds.
I'm Sam, and I'm the maker of spears.
This is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry.
And
Today's
murdering worlds.
Merging
worlds.
worlds. Yeah. Murder, that's a different department. I don't work there.
Yep.
Don't worry about that.
Okay.
We don't talk about it. Today's a Spooktober 6th, 20 Jubilee. Before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be swears and curses, profanities
And
all over
ghosts.
the place in this show. Ghosts, skeletons. Skeletober or Skeletember is over, which I am pushing for Halloween creep. I want more Halloween stuff happening in September.
Yep.
If Christmas can do it, Halloween can do it.
Yeah.
It's only fair.
Halloween, objectively better holiday.
Technically, Halloween could make its way all the way up to the day after Valentine's, and I'd still be okay with it.
I think it should make its way all the way up to the day after Halloween.
Just wrap
Of
around.
the prior.
Just loop it. Yeah. Yep. Imagine integrating Halloween into your box of chocolates, into Easter, instead of hunting for eggs, you're hunting for skeleton eggs, which look a lot like regular eggs.
But it's basically a rib cage for some reason.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned. Every time they're like, it's a skeleton spider, it's like, it has a rib cage now.
They put a rib. Yeah, you could buy skeleton spiders or skeleton octopus.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife and I were collecting strange nonsense Halloween skeletons for a while. We didn't see a particularly good one for a bit, but I did see one at Walgreens yesterday, which was a rubber duck skeleton. It was like
good.
Not a duck skeleton.
A rubber duck. It was like shaped like a rubber duck. We have like in our first floor, like our main bathroom, we have a little teddy bear skeleton from a few years ago.
That's great.
We just like so
not
much.
A bear skeleton.
That's a teddy bear skeleton. Yeah, it just sits on the back of the toilet just to say hi to you because
it's spooky, but cute. So anyways, we'd like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. If you'd like to support the podcast and help keep our mic juices flowing, then head on over there and toss us a single or recurring donation. We really appreciate it. All right, guys, we got a bunch of things to talk about today. First off, we've got a couple of pieces of media for our segment, Nail or Whiff. This is the segment where we don't review something using, stars or whatever. We just try to figure out what they were going for and did they nail it?
Yeah, it's not even about if we liked it. It's just
because sometimes somebody did a really good job at something you hate.
Yes.
But you got to appreciate that.
Yeah, reviews are just too polluted by people's own taste, and so we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah, we have no taste, so don't even worry about it.
We are objective observers.
No flavor, no spice. So Sam, Baldur's Gate 3. There's this game.
Okay, I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It just came out a little while ago. I don't know. It's making some noise-ish.
Yeah, some indie studio.
Yeah, and I play. I don't have a lot of time. But I play for like about 110 hours. So
Yeah, just kind of squeezed it in a little bit.
Just kind of between baby stuff and work stuff.
Give it a little sample.
Yep.
Sampling.
I don't know if that's like you said, objectively enough time to be able to say if something's good or not. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert. But I'd say they nailed it.
Nailed it.
That's my.
I agree.
Yep.
Hot take.
You
heard it first here.
Yep.
Baldur's Gate 3.
People aren't talking about it, but
Nope.
I gotta say they should be.
People are talking about it so little. We're just going to join with that and not say anything else about it.
Yep. That's it.
That's the plan.
Nailed it.
And I told Ed and Sam, I was like, if we talk about Baldur's Gate 3, it's gonna be hard for me to contain talking about the crazy shit I've been doing, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to talk about all the crazy shit I've been doing in that game.
You're just right about to do it.
But I'm not going to do it.
They nailed it. That's it.
I did all kinds of crazy shit in that game, though. just so you know. Also, no one will save you. I'm not saying that. That's a name of a movie.
But that is a good thing to say during Spooktober, you know?
Yeah.
It's very spooky.
You're on your own in Spooktober.
Put
no one will save you.
oxygen mask on first. You know,
I've never heard of this movie. I don't know this movie. What is this movie?
it came out on Hulu. Yeah. And I saw a single trailer for it a while ago. And I was like, that looks fun. And
Same.
Gist of it is that aliens invade. That's it.
Sick.
Aliens invade, and you're just following this one person in a small town who, you know, has been through some shit. Aliens invade.
What flavor of invasion is this? Is this spooky, subtle invasion, or is this giant, devastating apocalypse invasion?
It's apocalypse level.
Okay.
But your experience of it is more, it's not subtle, definitely not subtle, but your experience
It's
of it
not
is
like,
more spooky and small, right? Like
It's a person's experience of this
yeah.
very large scale invasion.
And a person who says nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a Gordon Freeman
she's got
situation.
Like, I think she has one line of dialogue. Maybe the whole movie has, because like nobody else is like participates either, really, right? It feels like people. It feels like people talk more than that because the acting is really well done, and there's a lot of just like. But there's even a moment like where early on where the main character goes into a convenience store and is kind of confronted by a couple people. I'm not going to get into details, but like in my memory, some words are exchanged, but actually all that happens is one of the people spits on her. That's the whole thing.
Staring.
And they're just looking at each other.
Yeah. So it's I would say it
You know, one of those like hostile spits, you know, where people are like,
Oh, yeah. We've all been there. Yeah.
We've all been there.
You know,
We've all received it. We've all sent it.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's
That's just good communication.
Yep.
Yeah, so I would say that the thing I liked about it, I think the thing you go into is it's a monster feature, right? Which means you get to see the fucking monsters. This isn't like
Right out of
let's
the
wait until the end and still not show you anything. No. You get to see them. You get to see them early, and there's a couple of different kinds, and it's fun.
Yeah. And usually when you see the monster, it's just like, oh, okay, well, that just ruined it, you know? Like it doesn't.
Yep.
Yeah. And like these are gray aliens. They're gray alien
gray
monsters.
aliens.
You don't expect it to work at all because like
How tall are they?
human tall. Well, and they get taller. I'll just say
That's the thing.
without any details. But like, yeah, they did a good job of like these weird gray aliens that are just boring ass gray aliens. Like at first, like that's what it seems like, and then they get like weirder and spookier. Not exactly more horrifying, but like definitely creepier and spookier. But also like hilarious at the same time. They make these little like gestures, you know, because like you'll see it. And they're like. They have this moment where like the character's being chased by one of these aliens, you know, and it just like stops and then it starts looking at her and then kind of crouches down and puts its arms in this little like prayer pose and just keeps staring. Right? Like it's just fucking weird. And it's
lots of weird shit.
It's
like that, where you're
creepy
I like that though, because like
and
they're
hilarious
aliens,
at the same
right?
time.
And
yeah,
so
it's weird as shit.
you wouldn't be able to easily map their body language and behaviors onto things like animals or things that like we are accustomed to, right? So
Yeah, it feels like it's like trying to communicate something, you know, but because it's also like these weird gestures are also how they communicate to their spaceship, right? And so so it's like clear, but it's just creepy and weird. So yeah, it was very fun. I had a great time with it. The ending is bizarre, but still kind of fun and interesting and like open to interpretation, you know?
I think the whole thing works well. I think it is one of those divisive ones where they clearly were going for something particular.
Yeah.
In terms of how the whole thing feels, how the whole thing wraps up.
and they nailed it.
They nailed it.
I think they nailed it.
You know, you can not like because it's a particular choice they made that's not the usual choice. So I would recommend it. The ending is a surprise. I'm not gonna say anything about it. It's weird, but it's a good time. So if you like seeing some aliens and you know, a little bit of that, like it's scary, but not really, because they're very clearly, you know, some monster movies, like afterwards you think about it and it's like Jaws, right? Where you're like, oh fuck, like every time
Yeah, it kind of creeps you out still.
no matter what. Yeah. I didn't get any of that with this one because it was like somehow
well, because it was kind of
safe.
It was kind of funny. Like, yeah, because it was like so weird that it was kind of just also funny.
Weird. Yeah.
So yeah, it's still to this date there've only been like 2 monsters on screen that I've been like actually like impressed by. Still not necessarily like scared of because that's just a hard thing to pull off. But
What are they?
The disgusting slime, the giant slime monster, like muscle monster thing from was it season 3 or 2 of Stranger Things?
Oh yeah, that was
It's just like so delightfully horrible and gross, right?
And it's just made out of all the people of the town.
Yeah,
It's just made
that
of
one
meat.
is that one's good. And then that, unfortunately, it's one of those future movies like I can't
District
remember.
9?
No, it's got what's his face, Chris Pratt in it. It was like I can't remember if it was an Amazon Prime original or what it was, but it's that one where it's like aliens kill everybody in the future, but we figure out how to go into the future to go fight.
And they have like spike things.
Yeah, they shoot spikes and stuff. I can't remember what
I remember that.
but those fucking aliens are
They were good.
really good. And unfortunately, that movie has the dumbest plot twist of all time. And then the second half of the movie is just like, what if we did the worst sci-fi stuff possible and then did that for the second half of the movie? But the first half of the movie is just like these amazing, terrifying aliens that are just so good.
Halfway through the script, they realized they forgot to cram all the tropes in.
Yeah, so they stuck them all in.
Speed ran it.
And actually, it's funny because I keep on seeing every once in a while, I'm looking for something to watch. And then I see that thing pop up again. And I'm like, ooh, because like I want to actually experience the first half of that movie again. But then I remember how stupid and bad the second half is. And then I don't do it. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Edge of Tomorrow, also a great. No, that's a different one. But similar.
It's got a similar name.
It does have a similar name to the Chris Pratt one.
But that's the Tom Cruise one.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah, that was
so
fun.
good.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched Edge of Tomorrow, definitely watch that.
fun.
Nailed
October's
it.
a good time for like those kind of spooky
Lots of spooky stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Pick one up.
Yeah, I'd say my best like monster movie would have to be Cloverfield.
That was so good.
OG Cloverfield.
OG Cloverfield. So
yeah.
good.
Yeah,
I need to rewatch that. It's been a while.
The scene where the dude is like standing under it with the camera and it just looks down at him. Oh, it's like he's dead. He's fucked. It's over. Yeah, they nailed it. All right, let's talk about some game dev stuff.
Okay.
So we've been in the thick of it, for about 3 years.
It's real
now.
thick. Turns out.
Yeah, we're actually about 3 years in. Crashlands 2 really kind of ramped up in real production in about October-ish of 2020. It's 2023, right? Yeah. 2020. What year is it?
Yeah, I started working on it in
It was the summer of 2020.
June of 2020.
Yeah, Sam started going through compiling a bunch of like research and design notes and stuff like that.
You guys did your multiplayer test was the big thing we started.
Yeah, we were doing a bunch of tech research and stuff, but then the actual sort of like production of the code and assets and all that really started in earnest in about October. So yeah, we're kind of around that 3-year mark, and it's going pretty good. We hit a milestone recently that it referred to as the golden path. So if you kind of think about it like if you have a game that's pretty open, then the player can do a lot of weird things. They can end up in strange places in the world. They can do all kinds of side quests, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, when you're developing, you're developing the story and the locations and all that, as a developer, you do kind of have a general idea of what would be like the best sort of
just the intended path. Right?
Yeah, kind of like the main through line of like how the story's going to go and stuff like that. And so we recently hit our golden path milestone for the first biome, zone. It's different from the original Crashlands in the sense that there's not like in the first Crashlands you would be in one biome and then you'd hit a teleporter and you'd just be in a completely new biome, and so they were like separated by loading screens essentially. Crashlands 2 doesn't have that. It's a lot more kind of a blurry line between zones, and you'll kind of see that sort of like the terrain doesn't just like suddenly you're in a completely new place. There'll be a lot of kind of blending and stuff, but we're just still going to call it the first biome, the first zone. And so let's talk about that.
We could also call it the first act, probably, right?
First act would probably make more sense. Yeah. And so that kind of culminates in a boss fight, and we've got a couple of these sort of like encounters out in the world that are almost like puzzly sorts of things that you do to work your way toward it, and there's like lots and lots of stuff. So let's talk about like the sort of focusing act of setting a milestone like this.
We should also as part of that, talk about how, because you just said it's been 3 years, right? And we just kind of, in essence, finished an honest, solid draft of the first of 3 acts, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean it's going to take 6 more years to get this game out the door?
I mean, most of our dev time is in tools. And essentially it's to make it so that we are able to do things very quickly. And so during
answering design and technical questions.
And so during this first chunk of production, a lot of what we're doing is we're only doing enough content production to evaluate whether our tools are allowing us to be capable of doing an immense amount of content production.
And to answer design questions around
what to produce.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a lot of the initial stuff then is just, it's essentially, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, basically, which is like, all right, we got a sword. How do we get it in the player's hand? How do you even know what a sword hits with? How do you attach a recipe to it? How do you get this sword specifically? All that, just a mile-long piece of parchment that rolls, down the street with all of the details figured out. And essentially where we've gotten to now is we've been just slowly working our way toward a point where we can say that anything that we want to do, we essentially are either already capable of doing and have answers to all the questions, or are in a phase where we can extend existing systems in a really simple way to get that new kind of functionality. And we've been there now we've been there largely for a while, actually, a couple months. And that's kind of when we started on this more focused golden path idea, which was saying, okay, it looks like we actually have all the parts that we need at a baseline that with a little bit of extra extension here, flexion there, whatever, we can push them into that next level up. I think a really good example of this is, as I've mentioned right before the podcast, that our milestone last December was boss fight. Okay.
Yeah.
As in we wanted to have boss fights last December?
As in, yeah.
So it was in about October, I think, where we said like by the end of December, boss fights.
Yeah. Now it turns out, right, that the actual total distance in terms of systems dev between where we were and having a boss fight, not just having a boss fight, but like the reality of a boss fight, which is that they typically are these combinations. Yeah, you got to get to it. You got to, like, balance needs to be there. You need to have weapon choices, going in our case, a pet, like buffs.
Because like on a basic level, a boss fight is just a combat encounter, right? And like we already have those.
Yes.
But what makes it a boss fight is that is like Sam was saying, there's an integration thing, as in like it's part of something. It's part of the world in a meaningful way. There's like stories that take you to it. So you need all those kinds of systems. And then also the combat encounter can't just be stab the boss for 12 seconds and then get loot, right? Like it's
like there's a boss fight, right?
Yeah, so you need more things going on, including maybe the boss like summons little we refer to them as ads, but like refers to them as additional enemies, or there's like things in the boss's arena that the boss will interact with to like create hazards or things like that.
It goes through phases, right? So
the boss's behavior changes, or like it does something different at certain points, or maybe even the boss's arena changes, right? Like something comes out of the ground, or like the world opens up, or whatever. Well, these are all like pretty involved things that you need. And honestly, the biggest one is the integration thing. Like just having the boss exist in the world in a way that is meaningful and tied to every other thing is a big deal. Yep. Which means you have to have every other thing, right?
It's like a tree, right? It's like the reality is that you can't have a tree with no roots, attached to other things.
That's and you can't have an apple without also the whole tree.
The trunk and the leaves and the branches.
And so it's like you kind of have to have all that set up. And so when we had set that milestone last December, the error we had made was, I think, largely around not being able to see just the sheer volume of subsystems that were still required to get us there. And so it was like
it was the rest of the systems.
It was the rest of the which makes it.
Well,
it's a weird
I'd say though, like we knew we had a list of all the systems.
Yeah, we knew.
And the reason we set that milestone was because we wanted to put a fire under our own asses to say like, all right, we could be fixing minor bugs and talking about all kinds of side quests, blah, blah, but like we're setting this milestone so that we can focus our efforts on just banging out all of the systems necessary to get a boss fight put together.
Yeah.
And so, but like, this is the whole point of making a milestone is it's a focusing act. It forces you to prioritize things in a way to meet the milestone and not worry about things that, although may be annoying or important to you or whatever, don't actually matter as much in the context of the big picture, right?
Yeah, so I think that's really the big thing from a lot of the production work we've done. Is I feel like maybe in the last year and a half or so, have gotten much better at letting go of the list of things that does already exist that we know. Right, there's always a big list of like 1,000 things, whether it's more content that in a system that you know exists, whether it's answering like a few other questions about some content that have come up now that you've implemented it, or even like a new system that you also know needs to happen. There's always a giant list. And so that act of prioritizing the particular thing that is actually the most important, the big thing, right? It's very hard to do. I feel like we've gotten much better at it over the last year and some change. In terms of just being like, nothing else matters right now until, like, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you get X, Y, or Z done because the game still doesn't have, this thing, this big damn thing. So who cares about those?
The fact is, like, we are tinkerers, right? Like, we would be content just fixing bugs, refactoring things, polishing stuff, just being like, what if? And then just put a weird, dumb thing in there. Right? But at some point, you've got to decide what the game's going to be and what it's not going to be and focus on delivering that. And that's where the milestone stuff comes in, right? So we're definitely like deep now into the phase of game development where the concept of the game is quite solidified. Like it's got a strong sense of what it's going to be. And now it's just a matter of
the tools are solidified. The systems are solidified. Also, like not in that they can't be nudged in other directions or extended, right? But in that we have answers to all the questions that definitely needed answers, right? And we could just basically finish the game with the set of answers that we have, and not add any other ones. We won't, because we'll find things that we want to do, as we go on, and still have things that we know we want to do. But we are now at that phase of development where now we get to kind of, it's no longer like, oh shit, before we can accomplish a game, we have to still build this and build that and build this and build that, right? And it's now more of, hey, cool, we can build the game now. So now it's all about building it and then
build as fast as you can.
And then adding some extra stuff here and there as we go,
Yeah. So what I think has been most interesting about this is that we've on the dev side, then a lot of my role has shifted such that Seth's doing a lot of what I used to do in terms of a lot of the design or integration stuff of the particulars, right? So, hey, we got this pet. Let's go figure out the details all about it. Where does it show up? What abilities does it have, etc. And then that's freed me up to just be on the art side. So I've just been making art basically for about a month now. Yeah, I started essentially 1st of September, 2nd of September, really focus on that. And that's been really good too, because of course, the longer you do a thing, the more momentum you get, the more little, extra finesse you get in getting all together. So I know for me, at least, it's been an extremely productive month, just plowing stuff into the game. So it's coming along very fast. It'll still take, it's weird because like I feel like we say that a lot, but it's a big fucking game. So it's like it's coming along very fast, but there's just a lot. So I don't know. Yeah. It's just a lot.
It's never going to be fast enough,
Yeah.
But it's as fast as we can get. But I mean, the other thing that's been kind of interesting is since making this transition where instead of me just programming tools and stuff, and then, up until now, Sam was doing art, but also doing lots of stuff with the world map and quest design and all this other stuff. So now that we're putting Sam onto just turbo art production, and I've switched over to doing a lot of stuff with the world map, then I kept getting hit by this bottleneck that has always been there, but it wasn't as much of a problem until now, because now we're in our big content push. And the bottleneck is that we have a world map, we have a map editor, but only one person can work on the world map at a time. Mm-hmm. The reason is it's kind of like
it's like saving a file. I mean, it's
it's just like saving a file in Dropbox, right? It's basically it's like having a document in a Dropbox versus a document in Google Docs. Like if it's in Dropbox, if I'm working on it, and then if Sam works on it at the same time, we both try to save it, then Dropbox is just like, I don't know. And then it will just like make a copy and call it a conflicted copy because two people edited it independently on each of their computers. and then Dropbox is like, I don't know how the fuck to like put those edits together, right? They're just two different files now. And so that's kind of what we've had with the world map, where there's a map file, but because we had such a light touch on it, in the sense that people working on the map were doing it kind of in like short bursts and generally just kind of like spaced apart from each other, then it just didn't really matter that only one person could work on it at a time. Well, now that we're in this content push, we just have so many scenarios where we do need one, two, or three people working on the world map simultaneously throughout the day. And this is just it, what we talk about in DevOps, that you can never get rid of the bottlenecks in your process. Whenever you relieve a bottleneck, you just have moved it. So now there's a new bottleneck somewhere else downstream, right?
But some bottlenecks are better than others.
Yeah. So at a certain point, the question is just like, are the bottlenecks that are throttling our production okay? Like, can we still produce enough at the speed we need given the bottlenecks that we have, right? And in this case, the answer is no, we cannot. And so I've spent this week working through the logic of being able to merge the worlds together. So the idea now, it's still going to be independent files on different people's computers. We're not going to do like real time editing, like a Google Docs or something. Fuck that. Fuck all of that. That would be a year-long project in and of itself. But this is a more constrained solution to the problem, which is to say everybody will still have their own copy on their machine, but when they want to upload it, or whenever somebody else uploads a new version, then we need to be able to merge the worlds together, so that if you've changed something and somebody else changed something else, then we get to keep both changes, right? So that's been it's been an interesting process, but it's been kind of cool, because like we've done a lot of work with the Game Changer, which is our tool that allows us to edit the game's data in this same kind of way. So like Sam can work on pieces of the game's data and I can work on other pieces of it, and then we merge them together, right? So I was able to recycle a lot of those ideas and like the code and the concepts to be able to merge the world map together. It's still going to be, there's still going to be some scenarios where like some stuff doesn't merge very well if we end up with two people changing the same thing at the same time. Yeah,
that's or just things that overlap, Like you can imagine all the bajillion of scenarios that arise, right? Like somebody deletes a character off of the map, or a specific creature, right? So that creature no longer exists, but somebody else on their copy didn't touch that creature, like they didn't delete it or whatever. And some other part of the map, they like made it so that in a change to that part of the map triggered by a quest, that creature appears or like gets moved there or whatever, right? Or a character gets moved there or whatever. And so somebody else deleted that thing for some other reason. And then you go to merge it on your side. It's like, oh, that thing is just gone now, right?
Yep.
How do you resolve that?
Yeah. So right. the best I kind of came up with is like, since there are essentially a trillion ways that a conflict between changes can happen, and there's no real obvious way to just definitively resolve that conflict, then what I did instead is I just put together basically a conflict viewer tool, where when you have your own changes and somebody else does something that fucks up what you were trying to do, the thing you were trying to do will get fucked up.
Yep.
That's just what's going to happen. But we will document the different places where the fuck ups happened, and
basically where your work got undone, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so there's a tool that takes you to the places where conflicts messed with the things that you were trying to do, so that you can, stitch things back together or resolve them or whatever. Because at a certain point you have to decide, like, and this is the same when you're doing code merging with Git or whatever. There's no automated solution to a conflict, right? No. It's just a question of, what do you want to happen now that two people tried to do different things to the same thing?
And even the automated solution, which is where there isn't an obvious conflict, right? Is it like, because like in Git, it's if two people touched what looked like the same line, right?
Yeah.
Then that's what creates conflict. In the case of like the Game Changer, it's if two people touch a member of the same data structure, right? And in the map, it's basically two people touch the same tile or the same entity or something, right? But those aren't, in the case that you didn't do that, where two people just touched different sets of things, seemingly, right?
Yep. You just smash them together. Who cares? It's fine.
Yeah. Then like in Git, you just merge them together. You say that's fine. And like in our tools, we just merge together and say that's fine. But that still doesn't even mean it's fine, right? Because things aren't fully represented just by the raw data, right? It's also how it all works together and all this kind of stuff, so that it can turn out that even though there wasn't technically a conflict, that merging stuff together was still created something surprising, right? That nobody expected. So this is one of those just unsolvable. It's not just unsolved. It's an unsolvable generic class of problem, which is how do you let two people make edits to the same thing, code base, map, whatever, and prevent surprises.
Yeah, and I think the general point is that you can't prevent surprises.
Well,
so
you
just try to minimize surprises and then try to inform so that you can hope that people can evaluate the changes.
Well, I would actually say you can prevent surprises through visibility. What you can't prevent is problems.
Yeah, that's
right.
fair,
Because people can create their own problems in an infinite number of ways. What you don't want is people to be surprised by the fact that there's a problem.
Yeah.
Which is where the idea of like a tool that you can use to view all of the places where things went wrong, and then you'll
have to walk through it to
resolve them, right? Yeah. So it's been interesting because when we first this has been kind of itching my brain for a long time. This problem of the world map being sort of stuck like this, where like only one person can work on it at a time. But it always kind of felt like this way too big of a problem to even worry about.
Well, also the wrong time to worry about it. Because I think to your point earlier, the reality is that it's only a problem once you have multiple people needing to touch the world map simultaneously. Right. And that
it's like you could tell it was going to be a problem.
Exactly.
Right? But it's annoying that it isn't already solved. Right. And that's the game. We talk about this a lot, right? Like trying to thread that needle of minimize how much you allow your tools and workflows to be janky, because that just creates a worse experience, right? But also finding the right time to fix that, because if you wait too long, then people had to deal with bullshit for too long. And if you do it too quickly, then you don't fully understand the scope of that problem, right? And you also have it because like the longer you wait, the more like tools and techniques and skills you'll have developed to solve that problem once you actually do. Right?
I always think about it like like when a storm's coming and like you could see it and you could sense it, and so there's the sense that like, oh my god, I have to do something about it, but you're actually dry still.
Everything's fine.
Everything's fine, and you just got to be like.
You just got to do stuff about it by the time it gets there.
Yeah, or even like a little bit after it arrives, right? Because the reality is like you don't need to go in. Like if you're outside, and there's like a storm coming. You don't really need to go inside until it's like raining, or like thundering. You know what I mean? It's okay to get a little wet, and in fact, usually it's better to, unless of course you have like forecast, whatever. But the point is like if it's gonna be sprinkling a little bit, and that's all it was gonna be,
that is fine. Yeah, but you won't necessarily know until the storm gets there.
So I think it's actually better. I think it's better to usually, when it comes to these production improvements, because the engineering costs can typically be very high, to essentially prioritize them on a almost like a just in time, or you'll know.
Yeah, well, because the problem is like you need to use the tool to actually do the thing that the tool is for. If all you do is just continuously work on tools, then you don't have anything. You have tools, but you haven't produced the thing that you were making the tools to produce. Right. So, so it became a problem, and so it's been interesting because since I've switched over to the content production stuff, then I've been bumping up against these tools constraints a bunch, and then it has kind of been the case that like half to 2/3 of my time has been fixing up and adding features to our tools so that it's easier for me to implement the content, and those problems were always there. But I think since I wasn't directly doing the work, I was just working on the tools. Then, the term is dogfooding for this, which is like using the product that you are working on so that you can actually understand the issues with it. Because
the metaphor coming from, if you're making dog food as a company but wouldn't feed it to your own dogs, then.
Right. because like when Sam and Jen were working on it, they don't know what the code base looks like. They don't know how easy or difficult it would be to add certain features or to change certain things. And also their objectives are a little different. Like they're just trying to get stuff in, right? And so they'll sometimes like let me know like, oh yeah, this thing didn't work or this is kind of annoying. But mostly they're just focused on
they work around stuff when
just
they can.
using the tools and getting stuff put into the game, right? And so it's just a difference in perspective of kind of like where your skill set is. And
you'll change your approach to using the tool because you treat the tool as a fixed entity, right? But if you're the person who works on the tool, then when you run into friction, you treat the tool as a thing that you change, not your approach to the tool, right? I was also because I made our VS Code extension so we could do GameMaker work in VS Code, and it's the same deal. It's like for the most part, I was just making it and then getting sus feedback and then fixing things, writing features, right? But then every once in a while, I have to actually like go do something in GameMaker. So like last week, I had to do some stuff, and just like the moment I dropped in there to try to do something, I was like, oh, I hate that it's not doing this, right? There was like some thing, and I think there's another kind of side to this, right? Which is not just it's not just that if you are like the person who makes the tool that you can look at it and see like, oh, I could change something here, and so that you go do it, right? But it's also that you can't not think about that. And so for me, at least personally, I get so distracted by the fact that like, oh, I don't like this and I could change it and I could fix it and I wouldn't have to deal with this anymore, that I actually can't work on the original problem. Like I have to actually go fix the tool just to be able to proceed, right? And
but I guess this is also where
it's kind of
those production milestones or the production chats.
Yeah, well, and this is a balance that I'm trying to strike, where it's like if I'm working on the content, like I'm supposed to be working on the content, right? And like I was saying earlier, you could just work on the tools forever and never actually produce something. But I'm trying to ride that line of I don't want to just spend all my time just working on the tools, So it's kind of hard to find that balance.
Well, I think it's easy
to. You're trying to ship something.
There's no just answer to the question of which side should you fall on, right?
You just got to treat each situation kind of ad hoc. So it's been kind of interesting, kind of finding all of these like production holes and bottlenecks and stuff. And but I'm very excited because honestly, like having the world map be stuck like this, like only editable by one person at a time for so long, and then now suddenly seeing the maps merging together is kind of magical.
It's very cool.
But then also just like that over the past month as I've been kind of working on learning how to do the content production, that like every day having to send a message out of Discord being, okay, I want to do stuff on the map. Is that okay? Or is anybody else? Like, oh my God, it sucks so fucking much.
It's a bad workflow.
Yeah. And now just being able to just open the map and do stuff and upload it, and it's going to be fine, Like the only time it's going to be a problem is if I did this, I'm working the exact same spot as somebody else, but as the world gets bigger and bigger, the chance of that happening just goes down and down, right? So it's very liberating. It's just like you don't realize a lot of times you'll be just like putting up with a shitty, awkward, slow process, but you don't truly appreciate how terrible it is
until it's just gone.
Until it's gone, you know.
Yep.
And it's often,
and I think that's one of the reasons too. I always fall on the side of like work on the tools forever, right? Which is why I'm the tools developer, because that way I can do that, right?
No, you can just do that.
But the reason is because the tools development is long. It's a long game, right? That's the whole point. And to Seth, to your point, because if you don't eventually make something with your tools, then, well, two problems. One is you haven't made anything, but the other one is you don't even know if the tool is doing what it's supposed to. Right?
Yeah, that's so.
Yeah. And so you need to have this sort of like dogfooding balance of using the tools that you make to work on the thing, but it just is an impossible trade-off choice, which is you can either continue to make the workflows and the tools better, or you can use the tools to make the thing, right? Assuming finite time and resources. Mm-hmm. So where you fall in the balance is one of those things that you shouldn't just fall on like, oh, we always prioritize this or we always prioritize that. Where you fall has to just match the practical reality of when do things have to happen? When are you going to run out of money? Like, all these kinds of things, right? Where what you basically want to do is you want to push things towards the tooling side with dogfooding to make sure you're making the right tools, right? kind of as much as you can get away with because that's that long view, right? Of like saying, in the long term, the earlier we had this, the earlier we made this better, the slicker the stuff was, you get that amplifying long-term compound interest effect, right? So,
but just like that storm thing, though, right? You don't want to do
it
until
you
got
gotta play the game, though. Yeah, you got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, you may not have needed to do it at all.
Yeah,
which is
and there's no good answer there.
Easy to get burned by.
But you also have like a Jevons paradox problem, which is that the better your tools get, the more stuff you do.
Yes.
Or the bigger the things you do, or the more complicated the things you do, because your tools can handle it. Yep. Well, as you scale up your problems because you've scaled up all the things you're doing, you also scale up the need for yet more tools to solve the ever-increasing scale of your problems. So, like, for example...
But it's just like bottlenecks, though. It's like doing more of something isn't just like a lateral shift, right? Necessarily. It could be, depending on what your goals are, right? But if you're able to now, like, I think this is a good example, right? It's like, like now people work on the map a lot more, right? But we know how big of a map kind of we need, like how much content we need. So yeah, we could make it all bigger now than we like would have been able to do before. But
there's a new problem though that comes from this, which isn't, it's not about size, it's about visibility.
Yeah.
Because since more people, so up until now, whenever somebody was working on the map, they had to talk to everybody else on the team and say, I'm about to do this on the map. Is that okay? Right. Mm-hmm. Which means that everybody on the team generally knows what is happening on the world map. As soon as we no longer have to do that. Yeah. And as soon as we no longer have to communicate about what we're about to do in the world map, that means the map is going to be changing in a way that nobody knows except for the person who made the change. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it will be changing in lots of different places at the same time in an invisible way, so and you'll be surprised.
Patch notes too.
Now you need change logs. Yeah. Now you need. So that's actually
this is why visibility is always like it's the thing that kind of lags, right, as you increase capacity.
Yeah.
Visibility and logging all these kinds of things to be able to understand like what's happening always lags. It's always treated as like, oh, we'll do that eventually, right? But it becomes increasingly essential as your scale grows.
And it's deceptive because you can't see all the problems that you can't see because you can't see them. And so as you scale up all your tools and you scale up your production, the volume of invisible things that are fucking with everything just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah.
And unless you do something to purposely kind of like shine a light on them to really get a sense of what's going on, you don't even realize just how big of the problems you've created are. You know,
I think to me, the guiding point of all this is that it has to be rooted in delivery.
Yeah. There's some delivery problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah. Because the reality is like we'll actually be able to get away with having no patch notes. We could potentially get away with no patch notes forever in the case because of the scale of the team, right? At max currently you'd have 3 people making changes.
But we still need QA to test them. Right.
Still need QA to test them. But there's ways to do this, right? They're kind of dumb. But yeah, you should make a card when you make map changes, whatever. There's ways of like kind of putting some visibility in, right?
Yeah, the way is essentially offloading patch notes into a system where you still have patch notes, but they are unpredictable, ad hoc, and not integrated manual into anything. Yeah. They're therefore full of errors, sparse,
But again, you always have to ask the question, like, what's the result of these errors, right? Because I think the trap to fall into is that all of these things are fractal. That's basically what you're getting at, right? It's all fractal. Yeah. So it's like you can just go and you could try to design a system then that has like a perfect information capability or perfect handoffs or whatever. But again, the question is always like, given how much time you have or how many resources you have, what is the relative importance of that the next improvement to some existing tool set or even like a whole new tool compared to the speed with which you need to be moving or the error rate that's reduced downstream or whatever. It always has to be done in that light, right?
Well, you're always that tunnel vision. You're always choosing when you do something, you're necessarily not doing something else. So that's
and I guess more importantly, whenever you choose to do something, you are choosing to not do infinitely other things. And I think that's the piece that
you cut off infinite branches every time you make a choice.
Yeah. The choice you make is extremely important because the opportunity cost is just infinite. It's just infinite all the time. And so the reality is like you have to be able to make that choice knowing that it is the one that's putting you actually closer toward your end goal, not just closer to like some localized better version of X, Y, or Z, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is, like, often, I mean, you see this with most programs, right? Just about every single program. If you're a power user of the thing, you work around all sorts of bullshit in it. And you can do so actually pretty fucking effectively for a long time, even if it's the case that, and it might be the case that from an engine perspective or that tool maker's perspective, modifying that one thing would be like just an astronomical amount of work, right? Versus the outcome being like slightly slicker in this one particular domain.
But a lot of time it's not, which is
a lot of time it's not. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, which adds, but it adds again to the complication of the algebra that you're doing, right? Because there's always a huge number of slickenings that you can do that are cost effective. They're just cheap to do, right? And
I have good action,
but there's infinite of those, right? And so it's the same. It's the same problem all over again because there are things where it's like I think we use Favreau, right, for our work management, and the fact that they have this like weird half support of Markdown drives me fucking crazy, right? Because as a programmer, like, I want everything to be in Markdown because it's a nice portable format that I can convert into whatever I need to. I can do, speaking of, diffing and merging stuff, like I could do that really easily. It's great. And they have like half-assed support for it. Like sometimes I paste some Markdown in, it like turns into rich text. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Sometimes when I paste it in, it doesn't. If I use it like as I'm typing, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It only has partial support anyway, so it has like a few of the headings and like nothing else. And in the end, I'm like, it would be better to just not have Markdown support at all than to have this like half-ass thing, right?
Then whatever this is.
And I'm constantly working around what that is, and it constantly drives me crazy. That's one of those. That's where like I actually don't use Favreau when I can help it as a consequence of like that.
Just because of the mark.
Yeah, it's just it's so annoying to write stuff in there, right? And it's because
as a document editor, it leaves some things to be desired.
Yeah, and that's a hard problem. So I get why they're like not putting resources towards that, right? And I think if it didn't have Markdown support at all, I would just treat it like kind of a medium editor. And then it wouldn't be a big deal, actually, right? But it's because it's like halfway in there, then like what I need it to be and how I treat it makes it so that the whole thing like falls apart, right?
Well, I mean, we've experienced this with our own development, where with just about anything that we can think of, we're anywhere from an hour to 2 weeks away from having that thing in the game if we want to have it.
Yeah.
Yep. But it's
that's for a million things.
Yeah. But if there's a list of a million things, you got to pick the next thing that's going to go in, and we can put in whatever we want.
And it's still always annoying though when there's like when one of those things that finally comes up in the queue, but it's been on the queue for a long time, and then it takes 10 minutes, right? And you're like,
dude, this has happened a few times where we've had things that have been on the list for like a year, and then there was one thing that took 11 minutes to implement. But the thing is, it only took 11 minutes because of all the shit that happened.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
The reason that's why the just-in-time delivery part. That's to me, the reason to do just-in-time delivery is it is like a natural optimization where it's like, okay, well, we know we need it, so we can prioritize it, right? But it's a natural prioritization mechanism, but it's also a natural optimization mechanism because of that, which is then by the time you do it, you have every possible resource at your disposal that you could have to doing it quickly and well.
So we experienced this because so one of the other things about our development pipeline is that we have this procedure that we call packing the world, where what it does is it essentially takes a snapshot of the world map as well as the game's content, which comes with a game changer, bundles them together into a package, and bakes that into the project so that we can deploy a static version of the world for testing. And this is the version that will be packaged with the game when we send it to players and stuff like that. So the idea is that way we can continue to work on the content and stuff through the web, while the static version that's packaged with the game stays the way that it is, right? So it's kind of like a way of branching the content and all of that. But we wanted to get the change logs from that packaging process added into the game's patch notes, but the change logs were coming from somewhere else. They were coming from the game changer. And we're going to have the same problem with the world map when we add change logs to the world map. Essentially, we got several different places where our patch notes will come from through these different tools, and we needed a way to integrate all of those patch notes together whenever we deployed a new version of the game. And we've been sitting on this problem for a real long time.
Just the whole time.
The whole time. Because it's a big, it was a big problem. But I think it was just on Monday.
Yeah.
On Monday, we solved it because ChatGPT exists. And the solution to the problem involves Git hooks, which is it's a technical thing. It's basically that whenever we commit a change to the game, we can write these little programs that, like, before we commit the change, this little program will run and do stuff. And so we needed to make a Git hook that would go and grab all the text for these different patch notes and pull them together and deliver those whenever we made our commit. But the language that you need to use to write these scripts is Bash.
Well, you could write them however, really. Like, you could kind of write them in all kinds of stuff, but the sort of natural way to do it is to write a Bash script.
Which is essentially incoherent garbage, is my understanding of it.
If you've ever read it, well, Bash is, so it's this Linux-y thing, right? But it's a weird language just kind of from the outset. But the thing that's in particular about it is how fucking opaque it is, I would say how action and information dense it is, right? So if you're using a language like JavaScript or something, right? It's like you're basically like reading what it's going to do as like it's like
append these things to that.
It's like reading English sort of, right? But when you read Bash, you just see like some letters and some dashes and some brackets.
Reminds me a lot of taking math courses.
Yeah, it's
where
very
they're
abstract.
they're like, you know what? Fuck you, Greek. We're just doing Greek. We could write the word some, but we're not gonna. We're gonna use a giant epsilon. What? Like just use words, but no. No, that's not how math works, and that's not how Bash works.
It was literally because it also just kind of take a step back. Like we had decided not to solve this problem is actually what happened, because we looked at it from just like without trying to solve it and just said, oh, this just seems like a lot, and we don't.
There's a lot,
and we don't need to yet, right?
We don't need to yet.
And so
that's usually the main reason. It's a lot.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot.
Yeah.
And it, just like with anything, like we're talking about, you can't go deep enough into all of the things to actually figure out what would require, because then you've already done the work. So this is one of those things that like felt like a lot, so we didn't dig into it until finally we're like, we really need to do this, right? And I think it is still the case that because then we realized really quickly that like, oh, we've used Git hooks for other things. We're like, oh yeah, we could actually use that to leverage the system we already have and do this pretty easily, right? So. But had we tried to do this a while ago, we might not have realized that we could take that easy approach, right? So it is still the case that like, while we did know in like broad strokes how we would go about it and come up with a way that was going to be really simple, we wouldn't necessarily have come up with a simple way earlier, right?
Yeah. And
when it came to the ChatGPT part, it was one of those where I was like, okay, I know I can write a script to do this now, and it won't take very long, but I'll have to like test it, and it'll be fairly verbose because it has to like just do a bunch of file operations and do a bunch of stuff.
And you have to go through a lot of documentation to figure out like how to even write that script because it's...
Well, yeah, and from the Git hook part, then I need to go read a bunch of stuff like, okay, how do I get this Git hook working and like all this kind of stuff. But in the end, I just like told ChatGPT what I wanted to do, and it just spat out to get, and it was like fucking 4 lines of Bash. Because again, Bash is
so concise,
dense. Because like, one of the lines,
it would have taken an afternoon to figure out what those 4 lines needed to be. You know.
Well, again, it only took like 5 minutes because I just highlighted it and I was like, "Hey, GitHub Copilot, what does this do?" Right?
So you had ChatGPT write it, and then you were like, "Oh,"
and then you had Copilot explain it.
Because I was looking at it and I was like, I don't understand how this could be doing this because it's not doing anything. There's nothing
like 14 characters.
Yeah. And it's like one of the lines is it was literally like a square bracket and then like a -s and then like the name of the file and then the other square bracket, the right side, That was it. And it was like, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And it was like, oh yeah, this is like checking to see if a file exists and then doing this other thing, like just with that. And I was like, how? Why?
You know that commonly known command for checking if a file exists: square bracket -s file name closing square bracket.
Yeah,
that one standard. -s stands for file. Does this file exist?
Yeah, it's hilarious. But so there are all these kinds of things like this where now that these days we can loop in Copilot and ChatGPT and stuff, right? Where problems that in the past when we went to solve them, because there's kind of two layers here, right? One is like realizing what the solution could be, and the other one is actually implementing it. And both of those things are change over time as you develop your own skills and knowledge, because then you see more solutions to problems and you're more capable of delivering on those, right? But then also the tools that you have access to are also changing at the same time. And those also change what solutions are available and how those solutions are implemented, right? And so when you take those things in combination, especially with these more modern tools like AI tools, right? How quickly you can solve certain kinds of problems changes. But also this isn't even an argument though for doing stuff just in time, because it's also an argument for revisiting some problems that you haven't visited in a while, right? Because that's also part of prioritization. It's like we were saying, like with this changelog stuff, we kind of waited until it just like was just too much of a problem. We're like, okay, fine, I have to solve this, right? Because it seemed like a big problem. But had we just revisited it,
right?
It took about 3 hours.
But had we just revisited it a while ago, there's a good chance we would have come up with the same solution. If you go back too far,
a bit longer,
we wouldn't have. But it would have taken a bit longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not that much longer, right? And
yeah.
And so again, like there's not an answer here. There's not just like just do just.
I do like
just
that.
There's
that you'll know when you need it or whatever. Is that the phrase? You'll know when you need it as one of the protocols for deciding.
Oh, Yagni. Oh, what is it? It's
you aren't gonna.
Oh, you aren't gonna need it. Yeah, it's basically saying like if you're. So I was introduced to this by one of our community members because so we have we have the Levelhead SDK, right, where you can download some code or you can just talk to the web API directly, and you can do things like fetch level information, bookmark levels, that kind of stuff. So you can write your own tools. And our community is doing some cool stuff with that. So a million years ago, when we kind of had first put this out and our community was using it, somebody had put their project on GitHub that was using it to build a website that was doing something. And just out of curiosity, I went and looked at their code to see what they were doing because I was like, oh, this is kind of fun, you know. And there was one spot in their code where they were verifying a level ID and basically saying like, is this a valid identifier or not, right? But what they were doing was just checking to see if it was 7 characters long. And so I made a comment there where I was like, these are currently 7 characters long, but there's no reason why they couldn't be different, right? Because, like, there might be some change we have to make in the future or whatever, right? And the guy just replied with Yagni, and I was like, I don't know what that is, so I had to do some Googling, you know?
That's the program way of saying, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, well, it's basically saying, like, this might be a problem later, but there's no evidence yet that it's going to be a problem. Brilliant. And so until I know for sure that I'm going to need it, you had treated it as I'm not going to need it, and you just don't do it, right?
And I think
because you could write your tools in a way that could account for every conceivable scenario,
it's a useful
but who
razor.
gives a shit?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's the idea of waiting until you're getting rained on a little bit before you do something about the fact that it's raining.
Yeah, because also the storm might just go right overhead and rain on the next town over.
Or
you never know.
Or it might be a tornado, you know.
Also might be a tornado.
You don't. So it didn't matter that she did some prep work.
Yeah, because your whole house is gone now.
Yeah.
So, you know, that I don't know what that does for you sort of planning wise, but it's not what you expected.
You couldn't have planned for it, you know?
Yeah. It's not how you thought your Thursday was going to go, but that's what happened, you know? All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta, for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, you can just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the community Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the podcast archives. And as always, if you'd like to help support our upcoming game, Crashlands 2, head on over to Steam and give it a wish list. It will help boost it on the Steam algorithm and get more eyeballs on it so even more people can give it a wish list. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye. Bye.